Good morning, everyone. It's March 1st, 2019. I'm Eric. I'm here at Zero Hedge, Zeus. Lies America's news media tell. And not only do they tell these lies, but dumbass, gullible Americans believe this shit. This comes from Eric Zeus via the Strategic Culture Foundation. Here are America's recent targets for regime change, against which have been used economic sanctions, invasion, and enormous destruction. And all of them are nations that never invaded nor threatened to invade America. Iraq, 2003. Libya, 2011. Syria, 2011 through 2018. Yemen, 2015 to now. Ukraine, 2014. And Venezuela, 2017 to now. Because all of these were and are aggressive wars by the U.S. against nations that never invaded nor threatened to invade the U.S., they all ought to be subject to mega criminal prosecutions, as was done by the U.S., Britain, and the USSR against Germany at the Nuremberg tribunals after World War II. That was merely victor's justice applied by the U.S., Britain, and USSR, but this would instead be actual international justice, the first instance of such in all of world history. It's desperately needed, especially now. America's government and news media were and are remarkably unanimous in saying that these invasions and coups are and were done in order to advance democracy and human rights in the given target nation. But just look at these nations now. They pretty much have no democracy. Not that democracy is all that wonderful to begin with. And their human rights are far worse off now than they were. However, what actually brings and has brought in each and every case is instead massive bloodshed, death, poverty, destruction, and outpourings of refugees, and an increasingly dangerous world, the current world. Is this lying by the U.S. and its allies and their news media mere hypocrisy? Or is it something even worse? Far worse. In any case, only a fair and international judicial tribunal that's controlled by no nations and by no alliance of nations can possibly deliver a credible verdict on this. And so, such international criminal trials must be organized and carried out, or else even worse can be expected to occur. Impunity is desirable only by and for gangsters, and no land where it exists can be reasonably called democratic or free, for that matter. America's news media, especially the mainstream ones, not only cover up important truths, but they routinely lie. Now, I'm not going to lie here. Sometimes I get shit wrong. I'm only human. And I can only make predictions based on the best available information. So, of course, I'm going to be wrong from time to time. It happens. But I do not go out of my way to blatantly lie about shit. I try my absolute best to tell the truth, no matter what. To tell the truth about the world we live in, and to tell the truth about myself personally. Both the Democratic Party's media and the Republican Party's media report the same lies, which are the government's lies on these international matters. And again, Democrats can't get shit done without Republicans, and Republicans can't get shit done without the Democrats. These are lies on which there is bipartisan unity by the nation's press and both political parties, in order to deceive the public into support for invading and occupying or overthrowing via a coup or otherwise some foreign government. Their target is always a government which America's billionaires who control international corporations want to replace, and so the U.S. regime unanimously lies against the targeted government as being dangerous and evil, even though the given given takeover target has never invaded nor threatened to invade the United States, is no real national security threat to the American people. Only on the basis of lies can that succeed. This is the main function of the press in such countries: deceit on those international matters. In other words, the U.S. government is fascist, like the Axis powers were in World War II. This is worse than, for example, merely wasting billions of dollars on building a border wall against Mexico in order to protect Americans, but it receives far less press attention, perhaps because the press is so unanimously endorsing and supporting these atrocities, and that's yet further evidence of the American regime's fascism. The press is owned and funded by ads and donations from America's billionaires. Let's see, I was rudely interrupted, or not so rudely actually, but okay. I'm going to start back at the press is owned by and funded by ads and donations from America's billionaires. The very same people who fund our politicians and who also own controlling interests in the weapons firms such as Lockheed and Martin, which can't survive without these weapon sales, and which therefore demand constant conquests in order to create new markets for their wares, new allied nations, or they said wares, wars, in order to create new markets for their wars, new allied nations. So naturally, America's military is mainly the enforcement arm of the billionaires who control U.S.-based international corporations, especially the weapons firms and the extractive firms such as mining and fuels, which corporations crave to control foreign natural resources. And those people also control America's government and press. And this produces the unanimous decision for these regime change operations, which likewise fits the fascist model. Now, I'm going to explain something to you. By law, a corporation has to pursue all avenues to higher profits for their shareholders. Now, the United States is a corporation, the United States government. And as such, as a matter of law, they have to do whatever it takes to maximize the profits of their shareholders, which are the billionaires of this world. You know, like George Soros, Bill Gates, Ted Turner, and so on and so forth. It's a matter of law. Okay? That's why things are the way they are. Now, I explained in my first video I uploaded today, I explained that there are two constitutions. We have the one written by our founding fathers, and then we have the corporate constitution, and this is the constitution we live under. The U.S. is clearly the world's leading fascist nation, and there is no close second. And none of the nations that the U.S. regime is trying to conquer is fascist at all. What Germany was under Hitler, the U.S. is and has been, at least since the time of U.S. President Ronald Reagan. The U.S. has been a dictatorship since at least 1981. And I would argue since 1913. Coup or invasion, either form of aggression, is an international war crime. But the deceit against America's public usually succeeds because the public trusts especially the billionaire-controlled mainstream press, which is always leading these lies for conquest. And the American public, the masses, they phone for it hook, line, and sinker for the entire existence of this country. Furthermore, almost all of the alternative news media are likewise owned and funded by ads and or donations from wealthy interests that participate in and benefit from this mass deceit. From the stenographer graphic news reporting, the government's accusations against the particular target nation that's about to be or has been regime changed. And you'll see a lot of alternative media, such as the DC Clothesline, promoting going to war with some of these fucking countries. So if they do this, you cannot rightfully call them alternative media. They are engaging in the very same deceit and behavior as the mainstream media. For example, all of America's news media were stenographically reporting the U.S. government's many lies about Saddam Hussein's WMD in order to justify America's kicking out the UN's weapons inspectors and simply bombing Iraq and invading and militarily occupying and basically destroying that country, which had never invaded ours in 2003. All of the America's news media did the same, but especially all of the mainstream ones did of both the right and the left, all the way from Fox News to the New York Times. They all were hiding the truth and lying to support an illegal invasion, an international war crime under international law and violation of the UN's charter. Did Americans stop buying those newspapers and watching those news channels and buying those news magazines after the truth became reluctantly exposed during 2002 through 2005 that those WMDs did not exist and no longer had existed after 1998? No, the same news media still are in business. Or, no, the same news media are still successful. They all ought to be long since out of business, but such accountability does not exist in the news business. Not only does a major news medium hide its own corruption and lying, but it hides that of all other major news media, because otherwise the entire democratic system of control by the nation's billionaires would simply collapse. And you might recall, I believe it was David Rockefeller, I think it was though, or maybe it was John Rockefeller, who thanked the press for not reporting on the actions of the foreign or the Council of Foreign Relations. You remember that? America's news media report just as much false news, not merely what they call fake news, but actually false news today as they did back then, because America's news media covers up not only for themselves but also for each other, since they all lie so routinely in order to justify their government's aggressions, coups, military invasions, foreign mass murders, and so on. And those invasions and coups are part of the unspoken business plan of them all for growth or expansion of their global control. And that's what it's all about, global control. It'd be different if the American people benefited from any of this, but instead we pay a price. Remember, all this stuff is done in your name, especially those of you who are statists, voters, supporters of law enforcement and government in general. All of this evil shit is done in your name. It's not done in my name because I speak out against it. These atrocities are all done for national security reasons, and in order to spread democracy, and in order to protect human rights around the world. Meanwhile, our own human rights are trampled on. Don't forget about the 2 million people in prison, most of which are there for nonviolent drug offenses. Like that's not a human rights violation. And Americans continue to believe it, and to believe the regime, and to subscribe to those same mainstream news media. Accountable against lying doesn't exist in a hyper-aggressive democracy. A would-be all-encompassing global empire, which America has certainly become. Today, these news media hide that they've been lying when they report that Russia hacked Hillary Clinton's email and John Podesta's computer. Just click onto that right there. and you will immediately see the latest documentation that it's all mere lies against Russia, which is the only nation that does actually possess the military to stand up against the U.S. regime, since it inherited the arsenal of the former Soviet Union when the Cold War ended in 1991 on their side, though that war secretly continued and still is continuing on the American side. These fabrications could have many reasons, but perhaps the likeliest is in order to increase weapons sales by Lockheed Martin and other U.S. weapons makers, all of which are 100% dependent upon their sales to U.S. government and its allied governments. I mean, they lie about everything, people, and you keep voting for them, you keep supporting them, you keep paying taxes, you keep tonguing their asses. I don't understand. Please help me to understand why you would support such fucking wickedness, especially if you call yourself a Christian. I mean, this is the exact opposite behavior of your Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. But you serve two masters, one of which is the God of this world. And there's this example after example of these people doing evil shit, not only to foreign countries, but to us. And you continue to support them. You continue to root for them. And what we should be doing is uprising before we lose total control over our own destinations, before they start mass gun confiscations, which, these red flag laws have made it and made my predictions exactly on point regarding law enforcement's role in seizing your weapons. Sure enough, there are some sheriff departments that are refusing to, enforce these red flag laws in their particular area. But overall, law enforcement is playing the role I said they would many years ago, and throughout the years. So please, get your heads out of your asses, get your tongues out of the politicians' and cops' asses, and realize you are under attack. You are going to be killed if you don't arm yourself and learn how to use your weapons effectively. They are going to kill us. Just look at all the other fascist governments before this one. Just look at all the instances of gun confiscation and what happened next. I hope everyone has a great day. Remember, kill the state before the state kills you.